Part 1. The wind turned sharp in Green Hollow, Colorado, in the autumn of 1883. The town, tucked high in the mountains, carried the smell of snow on the breeze and the weight of misfortune that seemed to follow certain families. At the edge of town, the Barrett house shook against the gusts, shutters rattling like teeth. Inside, Abigail Barrett stood in the parlor with her small travel bag clutched to her chest. At 20 years old, she faced the woman who had raised her with folded arms and cold eyes. "You will go, Abigail," Miriam Barrett said firmly, "and you will go today." Abigail's heart raced. "He asked for Eloise, not me." "Eloise is 17, Miriam snapped. "Do you think I'd send her to some widower in Wyoming with nothing but a child and a mule? You're older. You're practical." "She's your daughter," Abigail whispered. "And you are not." The words landed harder than a slap. Abigail looked toward the stairs, hoping Eloise might descend, might speak up, but her younger half-sister stayed hidden. Eloise had always been adored, golden-haired and delicate. Abigail couldn't blame her for staying silent, but the silence still burned like betrayal. "I will not pretend to be her," Abigail tried one last time. "You won't need to pretend much," Miriam replied. "Just use her name. He'll be grateful anyone came at all." In Miriam's hand was the letter. Abigail had read it again and again, the handwriting plain and steady. Thomas Grant, 35, a widower with a 6-year-old daughter, living in Wyoming in a place called Willow Creek. One line had stayed lodged in her mind. "I offer nothing but honesty, a roof, and kindness." Her heart had stirred at those words. But Miriam was ruthless. "Stay here and you'll scrub floors the rest of your life. Go, and you might find a roof to call your own." So Abigail packed her few belongings, kissed Eloise's cheek through tears, and climbed into the stagecoach heading west. The journey dragged on for days. Dust rose in clouds behind the wheels. The nights were bitter, the air thin. Abigail pressed the letter against her palm under her coat, whispering prayers into the dark. "Please let him be kind. Let the child be gentle. Let this not be the end of me." When the coach finally stopped at Willow Creek, the sun was setting, gilding the hills in red and gold. Abigail stepped down, braced for a broken shack or sagging barn, proof of every rumor she had heard. Instead, she froze. Before her stood a sturdy log house with green shutters and herbs drying on the porch. The barn was sound, the fences straight, chickens pecking near the yard. Smoke curled from the chimney with the scent of stew. This was not ruin. Then she saw him. Thomas Grant walked from the barnyard, rolling his sleeves down. He was tall, broad-shouldered, sun-browned. Flour dusted his arm. His blue eyes were steady as he removed his hat. "You must be Miss Barrett." "Eloise?" The name caught in her throat, but she nodded. "Yes." A small smile touched his lips. "You're early. That's a good sign." From the doorway peeked a little girl with 2 uneven braids and freckles, shy eyes watching. She darted behind Thomas's leg. "This is Laya," he said. "She's shy, but she's got a big heart." Abigail's throat tightened. The child's hopeful, wary gaze unsettled her more than anything else. When Thomas offered to carry her bag, their fingers brushed, and warmth spread through her, even as shame prickled her skin. She was not Eloise. She was a stand-in. But this man's quiet kindness felt disarming. "Come inside," he said. "Supper's ready. Rabbit stew." The scent of thyme and fresh bread filled the warm room. The firelight flickered. The rocking chair swayed slightly as if recently used. Abigail lowered her head, overwhelmed. She had expected bleakness, not this strange sense of home. She had crossed into a life from which there would be no turning back. That first evening felt strange, balanced between comfort and guilt. At the table, Thomas spoke gently, guiding the conversation without probing too much. "After supper, I'll show you your room," he said. "I thought you might want one of your own while you settle." She glanced up, startled. She had expected demands, not respect. "Thank you," she whispered. Laya sat across from her, chin barely above the table. The girl kept sneaking glances, darting her eyes away whenever caught. Her patched dress and solemn face pulled at something deep inside Abigail. "Liah, say hello properly," Thomas encouraged. The girl gave the smallest nod. "That's enough for now," Thomas said kindly. Later, Thomas poured tea for them both, moving with quiet ease. "Chamomile," he explained. "Helps with travel weariness." Abigail cradled the cup in her hands, touched by a tenderness she hadn't known in years. When he showed her the room upstairs, she found it neatly prepared, a quilt folded at the foot of the bed, curtains drawn, a basin waiting. "If you need anything, just knock on the wall," he said. "My room's next to yours." That night, as the wind pressed against the windows, Abigail lay awake, guilt gnawing. But comfort dulled it, the comfort of a house alive with warmth. Past midnight, she heard small footsteps. The door creaked open and Liah appeared, clutching something. Abigail sat up quickly. "Liah, is something wrong?" The child shook her head, patted across the room, and placed a rag doll on the bedside table. Its button eyes were loose, fabric worn thin from years of holding. "For you," Liah whispered. Abigail blinked. "For me?" The girl nodded solemnly, then hurried out. Abigail touched the doll with trembling fingers. It was not grand, but it was priceless. It was trust. Days passed with a steady rhythm. Abigail cooked in the kitchen, read aloud from Thomas's old books, and learned the quiet ways of the household. Liah hovered near, shy but attentive. One evening, Abigail read a story about stars while the girl nestled against her shoulder. Just before sleep claimed her, Liah whispered, "I prayed for a mama." "God sent you after all." Tears filled Abigail's eyes. She kissed the child's hair, her heart breaking and mending in the same breath. For the first time, she felt she belonged, not because of the name she wore, but because of the love of a child who believed in her. Spring crept into the valley. Snow melted into streams, softening the earth. Thomas showed Abigail how to turn soil, plant beans and squash, prune berry bushes. He never ordered, only guided, his hands steady, his voice calm. "You'll have your own patch soon," he said one morning. She laughed nervously. "What if I'm no good at it? Then we'll grow weeds." "They're loyal." She laughed fully then, surprising herself. He looked at her with something unspoken, and she turned away, cheeks warm. Evenings were her favorite. After Liah was tucked in, she and Thomas sat on the porch watching dusk settle. Sometimes they talked, sometimes not. The silence between them felt alive, like something waiting to bloom. One afternoon, Thomas announced, "We're going into town tomorrow." "For supplies?" Abigail asked. "And for you," he replied. "You deserve more than one worn dress. If you're to be part of this family, you should feel like you belong." Her throat tightened. She didn't feel she had the right, but some deep, hungry part of her longed to say yes. In town, Thomas wrapped his coat around her shoulders. People greeted him warmly, with respect. He bought her 2 new dresses, a pair of boots, a ribbon for her hair. "You don't have to," she murmured. "I know," he said softly. "I want to." At the jeweler's, he chose a gold necklace with a carved poppy. "It means hope from sorrow," the jeweler said. "May I?" Thomas asked. Abigail only nodded. He fastened it carefully around her neck. She touched the pendant, its weight impossibly light and impossibly heavy. Back at the house, she stood before the mirror, wearing her new dress and the necklace. She looked like someone she didn't recognize but might one day become. Guilt tugged at her. This wasn't hers to claim. It belonged to a name she hadn't been born with. One evening, Thomas joined her on the porch. The valley stretched golden before them. He hesitated, then spoke. "Do you know what I thought when I buried my wife?" Abigail's breath caught. He had never spoken of her. "I thought the color of my life had ended," he said quietly. "But lately, the light is back." She stared at him, stunned. He met her gaze. "You brought that light, Abigail." Her lips parted, her confession on the tip of her tongue. But the words caught. Guilt pressed hard, but longing pressed harder. She stayed silent, and Thomas smiled, as if her silence was answer enough. Life found its rhythm. Abigail sewed small things read aloud by the fire, made the house warmer. "Feels like home again," Thomas said once, almost without realizing it. When he said home, she knew he meant her. Her heart lifted and sank. Because she was not who he thought she was. She hadn't written those letters. She had come in someone else's place. And one day, she feared, the truth would crash through and destroy it all. At night, she wrote in her journal, words slanted with pain. "I love them. I love him, but I cannot breathe beneath this lie. I am not Eloise." She hid the journal tucked under her bedding. By day, she smiled, read stories, planted violets near the porch. By night, she wondered how long she could carry the truth unspoken. And then, one stormy afternoon, came the knock at the door. Thomas opened it to two women. One he did not know. The other Abigail knew at once. Eloise. The storm hammered the roof as thunder rolled through the valley. Rain lashed against the windows, rattling them in their frames. Thomas opened the door wide, letting in a gust of wind. Abigail stood frozen at his side, her heart pounding so loudly she thought the others might hear it. Two women stood on the porch. The first was older, wrapped in a heavy shawl, her face marked by long travel. The second, Abigail recognized instantly. Eloise. Her half-sister's golden hair clung damply to her cheeks, her eyes wide and searching. She looked thinner than when Abigail had last seen her in Green Hollow, but her beauty was still striking. "Eloise," Abigail whispered. Eloise's lips parted in surprise. "Abigail, what are you doing here?" Thomas looked between them, puzzled. "You know each other." Neither answered. Silence stretched, broken only by the storm. Finally, Eloise stepped forward. "I am Eloise Barrett," she said quickly. "I wrote the letters. I came because I am to be your wife." The words sliced through Abigail. She could not breathe. Thomas frowned. His eyes flicked to Abigail, confusion shadowing his steady calm. "I was told this was Eloise Barrett," he said, nodding toward Abigail. Eloise's eyes widened. "No," she whispered. "This is my sister. My half-sister. What is she doing here?" Abigail's face burned hot, then cold. The truth, long buried beneath her silence, now lay exposed in the open air. Thomas's jaw tightened. He looked at Abigail. "Is this true?" She opened her mouth, but her voice broke. I was sent in her place." Miriam said. Thomas's eyes darkened. He held up a hand. "Enough." The storm roared louder, filling the heavy silence that followed. Laya appeared in the doorway, rubbing her sleepy eyes, frightened by the raised voices. She clutched Abigail's nightdress with small hands. "Papa?" she asked softly. Thomas picked her up, holding her against his chest. His voice was calm but edged with steel. "Go upstairs, Abigail. I will speak to Eloise. Later we will discuss this." Abigail wanted to protest, to explain, to beg, but the weight of his voice left no room. She climbed the stairs slowly, each step echoing like a nail in a coffin. In her room, Abigail pressed her back against the door. Shame flooded her. She had known this moment might come, but she had not expected it so soon, so brutally. She sank to the floor, clutching the rag doll Laya had given her. The child's trust was the sharpest wound of all. Downstairs, muffled voices rose and fell. Eloise's lilting tone, Thomas's steadier one. Abigail could not catch the words, but she could imagine. Eloise would claim her rightful place. Thomas would feel betrayed. And Abigail would be cast aside. Hours passed before the house grew quiet again. Abigail lay awake, staring at the ceiling beams, waiting for the dawn that felt like it would never come. Morning brought no comfort. Thomas avoided her eyes at breakfast, his expression unreadable. Eloise, dressed neatly despite her travel-worn state, spoke brightly of her journey, filling the silence. Laya sat stiffly, her gaze darting between the adults. At last, Thomas set down his cup. "There are truths that must be sorted," he said evenly. "I do not take kindly to deception, but neither do I rush to judgment." His eyes finally met Abigail's. The calm in them was more painful than anger. I will hear the whole of it tonight, he said. Abigail nodded, unable to speak. The day dragged like lead. Eloise wandered the house, admiring the curtains, the books, the fields beyond. It is a fine place, she said with a smile that was part envy, part triumph. Better than I imagined. Abigail kept to her chores, silent, her heart twisting tighter with every glance Eloise cast toward Thomas. That evening, after Leah was in bed, Thomas sat them both down by the fire. His expression was stern, but his voice was measured. Tell me everything. Eloise spoke first, painting herself as the wronged party. I wrote the letters, Mr. Grant. I dreamed of a life here away from my mother's sharp tongue. But when I finally set out, I discovered Abigail had gone in my place. She deceived you. Thomas turned to Abigail. And you? Her hands trembled in her lap. It is true I am not Eloise. Miriam forced me. She said Eloise was too young. She said I was practical enough for such a life. I came because I had no choice. At first, I meant only to fill her place for a time. But then, her voice broke. Then I came to love this home. And I came to love Leah. I never meant to hurt you. Silence followed, heavy as stone. Thomas looked into the fire. His face was unreadable. Both of you were put into this by Miriam. But the deception remains. My trust was taken. He stood. I need time. He walked out into the night, leaving both sisters by the fire. Eloise leaned close, her voice sharp. Did you really think you could keep pretending? Did you think he would never find out? Abigail whispered. I never wanted your place. You wanted everything that came with it, Eloise hissed. And now? Now we will see which of us he chooses. Days passed in uneasy silence. Thomas remained polite but distant. He spoke to Eloise with courtesy but never warmth. He tended to the farm to Leah, but his smile never reached his eyes. Abigail tried to stay out of his way. She read to Leah, cooked, cleaned, but the joy she had once felt in those tasks had drained away. One evening, while Abigail tucked Leah into bed, the child clung tightly to her hand. Don't go away, Leah whispered. You're my mama now. Abigail's heart cracked. I will never leave you if I can help it, she said, kissing the girl's forehead. But in her heart, she feared the choice would not be hers to make. As spring deepened, Thomas called them both to the porch. His face was grave. I cannot have both of you here, he said plainly. This house cannot hold such confusion. One of you must leave. Abigail's chest tightened. Eloise's eyes gleamed. Thomas continued. I will not make that choice lightly. I will watch, I will weigh, and I will decide what is best for my daughter and for this home. His words struck like a hammer. This was not just about marriage. It was about belonging, about family, about a future. The weeks that followed felt like a trial. Eloise tried to charm Thomas with smiles and chatter, praising his fields, admiring his strength. But she faltered with Leah, who shrank from her touch. Abigail moved quietly, as she always had, tending to the house, to the meals, to the small details that made life smoother. She did not seek Thomas's attention, yet often found his eyes on her. One evening, while she worked in the garden, Thomas joined her. He knelt in the soil beside her, silent for a long while. Finally, he spoke. When you lied about your name, he said slowly, did you mean to trap me? No, Abigail whispered. I only meant to survive. But then I wanted more. I wanted to stay. Thomas studied her face. His expression softened, though pain lingered in his eyes. And now? Now, she said, voice trembling. I would give anything to stay, not for myself, but for Leah and for you. He looked away, as if the words cut too deep to bear. The decision came at last on a warm evening, when the valley glowed with sunset. Thomas gathered them both in the yard. Leah clung to Abigail's hand, refusing to let go. I have thought long and hard, Thomas said, his voice steady. I cannot build a life on pretense. I cannot welcome deceit into my home, but I can see where truth lies now. Eloise's smile flickered. Thomas looked at her. You wrote the letters, but letters alone do not build a life. You have not shown the heart that this home requires. He turned to Abigail. His voice deepened. You deceived me, yes, but you also mended what was broken. You gave Laya back her laughter. You made this house warm again, and I see now that you are the one who belongs. Eloise gasped. You would choose her after all she has done? I choose the one who has given without asking, Thomas said firmly. And that is Abigail. Eloise's face twisted with fury. Without another word, she turned and stormed back into the house to gather her things. By dawn, she was gone, leaving only silence in her wake. That night, Abigail stood on the porch, the cool air wrapping around her. Thomas stepped beside her, his presence strong and quiet. I cannot forget the lie, he said softly. But I can forgive it. If you will be honest with me from this day forward, then perhaps we can build something true together. Tears filled Abigail's eyes. She nodded. I will never lie to you again. He took her hand, rough and warm. Then stay, not as Eloise, as Abigail. For the first time, she felt the weight lift. The lie was gone. The truth, though painful, had set her free. From inside the house came the sound of Laya's laughter, bright and unburdened. Abigail looked at Thomas, and in his steady blue eyes she saw not just forgiveness, but the promise of a future. And in that moment, beneath the wide Wyoming sky, she knew she had finally found home.